10th of September, 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. Sermon on Romans chapter 13, verses 8 to 14. Before we look at this passage of Romans in detail, we need to recall the overall aim of Paul's letter. He was addressing a collection of churches in Rome with both Jewish and Gentile Christian members. His ultimate purpose in writing was to settle the disputes between the Jews and Gentile believers, who were arguing over whether or not to keep aspects of the Jewish law. The Jewish Christians wanted still to adhere to the Sabbath law and the dietary restrictions traditionally kept by Jews. They condemned the Gentiles, who disregarded the Sabbaths and ate whatever they liked. The Gentiles, on the other hand, derided the Jewish Christians for not enjoying the freedom that Christ had bought for them. And so Paul set out to show that salvation and righteousness were not obtainable by keeping laws, but by faith in Christ. So basically, he agreed with the Gentile Christians. However, he did not approve of their lack of consideration for their Jewish brothers, and so he also emphasized the importance of love. Both those aims come together in our passage today. Paul is addressing Jews and Gentiles. He tells them that love is the paramount quality that they should display. They owe it to one another. Not to show love is to have an outstanding debt. He's clearly firing a shot across the bows of all Christians who dispute and criticize each other for whatever reason. He then states that the law is fulfilled by those who love their fellow men. He's not saying that there was anything wrong with the law given by the Lord through Moses, but the law is fulfilled now by those who love each other. Paul then lists several of the 10 Commandments that had formed the basis of the Jewish law. The law had held together the Jewish nation. There are many Christians who still believe we should keep the 10 Commandments, but Paul is saying quite clearly that to love is far more important and necessary. For anyone who loves, it would simply be unthinkable to steal, lie, murder, covet, commit adultery. And so one who loves would find that he was keeping the commandments, fulfilling the law, quite naturally. Such a person would not need a list of thou shalt nots, or be threatened with penalties, in order to love others. Actually, we know that Jesus set the bar far higher than the commandments when he told his disciples to love their enemies, to go the extra mile, to turn the other cheek. There's nothing to be gained by self-righteously ticking off the commandments if we harbour resentment or withhold love. Reading Paul's words, we can imagine the Gentiles feeling vindicated that they were right in not believing that they had to keep the commandments or any other law. You can imagine them preening themselves. But they would know now that Paul was challenging them to be more loving and understanding towards their Jewish brothers. Similarly, the Jewish believers would see that to focus on loving their Gentile brothers would mean that they were fulfilling the spirit of the law without having to be legalistic and proud of their rule-keeping. As Christians, we have a relationship with Christ, and relationships are not built on rules. Imagine a family in which everyone had to smile at least 5 times every day. Everyone had to buy the others a present once each month. That there was a list of do nots pinned up in the kitchen, a collection of penalties for those who broke the rules. It would rob the family of spontaneity. It would cause them forever to be checking up on themselves and each other. It would take away the joy of family life, the surprises, the unexpected kindnesses. That is what happened with the Jewish law. It had worked well to keep the nation together, but finally it failed to create love. Paul says that the whole law, including the 10 Commandments, is fulfilled if we love our neighbours as ourselves. Whenever I speak about not keeping the 10 Commandments, someone suspects that I indulge in sin. One person once asked me if I committed adultery. I don't. And Paul goes on to make it quite clear that grace, because that's what he's speaking about, that grace is not a license to sin. That point is a necessary step in his argument. Paul states that the Christians in Rome, and he means all Christians of course, past and present, must put away the deeds of darkness and put on the armour of light. Darkness is useful for concealing wrong deeds. Burglary, murder, theft, cheating are facilitated by darkness, and such deeds are metaphorically dark too, causing grief and pain, and needing to remain hidden to avoid the consequences. So Paul calls the believers to behave as if they're in the daylight, with nothing to hide, nothing of which to be ashamed. He lists dark deeds such as drunkenness, immorality, dissension and jealousy. Could he be thinking of the believers in Rome with their disputes? Instead of indulging in such acts of darkness, they should be clothing themselves with the qualities displayed by Jesus Christ, of which the foremost was love. Paul's final word is not to gratify the desires of the sinful nature. It's unlikely that the Christians in Rome were steeped in immorality, drunkenness and the like, but we can imagine they enjoyed winning arguments, pointing out the faults of others, perhaps even writing off church members as not proper Christians. I've heard that sort of talk too, from people who are quick to judge others, doubting their motivation and spirituality. And I'm only too aware that I enjoy winning arguments. There's nothing to be gained, though, from condemning and criticising others. Our churches will be much stronger and more united if we put aside unnecessary disputes and follow Paul's advice. As he himself said, it's time to wake up, to remember the day of the Lord is coming, the kingdom is imminent, and much closer now even than when Paul warned his readers to wake up.